Even more mystery surrounds the death of One Direction singer Liam Payne, with new reports now saying he was trying to escape his hotel room leading up to his deadly fall. Plus, a bag belonging to Payne was found on the second-story balcony, just one floor beneath his room. So what does all this mean, and how could it change the criminal case ahead? For that, we're turning to retired police commander Mike King. I'm Gillespie, and this is Law&Crime News. It's now been more than a month since the death of 31-year-old superstar Liam Payne, and still, there are more questions than answers. You probably know Payne most as part of the British boy band One Direction that hit the scene more than a decade ago when they formed on the competition show The X Factor. It was one of his 1D bandmates, Niall Horan, that brought Liam Payne to Argentina in the first place. Horan was visiting the country on a tour, and Payne flew into Buenos Aires to visit him. All of this happened last month when Payne checked into the CasaSur Hotel in the Palermo neighborhood. By the evening of October 16th, Payne had fallen from his third-floor balcony at the hotel. Investigators later determined his cause of death to be trauma and internal and external hemorrhage caused by the fall. But before all that, there were some signs that things were a bit off with Payne. Just this week, images captured from the hotel's security cameras were released, showing Payne being carried by hotel staff through the lobby. The employees then brought Payne into his room, where minutes later, he would fall from the balcony. It was about the same time that the hotel staff called emergency responders, reporting that there was a guest who was off his head on drugs and acting erratically. The worker reportedly said, quote, "I don't know if the guest's life is in danger. The room has a balcony, and we are afraid he might do something." By the time first responders arrived, Payne had already fallen from the balcony. As part of the autopsy, investigators found an alarming amount of drugs in Payne's system. Experts tested both his blood and urine, showing he had traces of alcohol, cocaine, prescription antidepressants, and something known as pink cocaine. That's actually a drug cocktail typically mixed with ecstasy, ketamine, and caffeine. Okay, I know you're multitasking when you're watching our videos, but if you're out and about running errands, listen up. I have to tell you about the free app Upside that gets you cash back on daily essentials. It's something I now use every time I pump my gas because it's so easy and it's free, so why not? Here's what you do. Download the free Upside app and buy whatever you're buying. You pay as usual and then simply follow the steps on the app to get paid. To find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside, or scan the QR code on your screen and use our promo code LCNews to get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. In the hours before his fall, investigators say Payne partied with 2 prostitutes, and they apparently left before his fall. Inside Payne's hotel room, officials found at least 4 supplies of narcotics and other drug paraphernalia, including a burnt candle, burnt soda can top, a piece of aluminum foil, and a Dove soap carton that authorities believe was used to secretly hand off drugs to Payne. Investigators still aren't sure whether Payne was conscious at the time of his fall, saying he may have been partially or fully unconscious. Following his death, Argentinian authorities conducted 9 searches of the hotel, a friend's home, and other areas nearby. According to the Argentinian National Criminal and Correction Prosecutor's Office, investigators conducted several dozen interviews during this time, speaking with hotel staff, family members, friends, medical professionals, biochemists, and even psychiatrists. Investigators have also looked through more than 800 hours worth of video from the hotel and other cameras that were nearby. On top of that, they've investigated Payne's phone, analyzing things like his calls, texts, messages, and social media accounts. Weeks after Payne's death, 3 people were arrested as prosecutors brought forward a 180-page ruling. The first suspect is a person who police say, quote, accompanied the artist on a daily basis during his stay in the city of Buenos Aires. This suspect is charged with abandonment of a person followed by death. We're not going to list his name because investigators haven't publicly revealed it, but this person is likely one of Payne's close friends. The second suspect charged in Payne's death was a hotel employee who, according to the press release, must answer for 2 proven supplies of cocaine to Liam Payne during the time he was in the hotel. The third suspect is an alleged drug dealer charged with supplying narcotics. Because police have not listed the suspect's name either, we're not going to include it in the report, but we believe it's a person who met Liam Payne just a few weeks before his death. The charges against all three suspects were brought early this month, but just this week, we're learning even more details about Payne's death. According to reports, when Payne's body was found, he had a bag with a strap around his shoulder. He didn't have that bag in the security camera video that was taken just before his fall, so Liam Payne must have put it on when he was back in his room. However, we still don't know what was inside that bag. We do know what was inside of another bag, though, that was found in the days after his death. This bag was found on the second-story balcony just one floor beneath Payne's room. Inside the bag were pills and some whiskey with a note written for Liam. Some are now theorizing that Payne may have thrown the bag onto the second-floor balcony and planned to get it later. There are also reports that Payne felt trapped inside his hotel room and was trying to escape. Additional reports suggest this may have been a pattern for Payne, who just months before was apparently locked in a Florida hotel room by his security guard, concerned for his safety, or that Payne may try to leave via the balcony. There is still a lot of questions in the death of singer Liam Payne, so to try and get some answers, we're joined now by retired police commander and host of the podcast Profiling Evil, Mike King. Mike, thank you again for coming on with us.
Oh, thank you, Sierra. I always enjoy being on with you.
Well, I like talking to you because you help me break down the cases, and that's what I want to do right now about Liam Payne. We're getting some new reports that he was actually trying to escape when he fell from the balcony that eventually caused his death. What do you make of that report?
You know, I've listened to those reports, especially all of the hype around the word escape. And I guess I find that word alone to be a little troubling because it makes it sound like he's a hostage or that he's being held against his will. And I think maybe a better term would be that he maybe was claustrophobic and needed to get away, didn't like being confined to the hotel room, but I don't believe he was being held there under his against his will, which kind of is the term that bothers me with the word escape. Nonetheless, he is trying to run away from something, whether it's a claustrophobic feeling, a feeling that he's just got to get out and breathe a little. And I believe that especially celebrities experience this at a rate that the rest of us have a difficult time comprehending. I remember my dear friend Wilford Brimley, the actor. He and I would go out to lunch, and we would just be surrounded by people wanting to get his autograph. And so oftentimes he'd wear a goofy hat, but it was pretty hard to change his big mustache and his personality. But I think these folks that are in this industry experience such an overwhelming amount of pressure that they oftentimes do get confined to their quarters just for their own protection and safety. And if you think about someone who's charged with the safety of a celebrity, they're going to put them where they can ensure that they're safe, especially if they're wanting a little downtime. But nonetheless, we know that historically Liam Payne would sneak out of his hotel room when he was on tour and other places just to get out and get free. And now, if in fact he was in a state that the autopsy seems to support that he was under the influence of narcotics, who knows what his thinking was and what he was trying to do at that moment. But again, I guess I just always push back a little bit on the word escape.
There's another clue that may lead us to understand a bit more what he was trying to do, in that Liam Payne was on the third floor balcony, and days after his death, on the second floor balcony right under him was his bag found. It had things in there, a whiskey bottle, it said for Liam. Obviously, it had belonged to him. What does that mean? Maybe that he threw it down there and was trying just to get to the second story balcony? What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think we're kind of surprised by some of the information that we're receiving, but I guess we're still a little bit in the dark, Sierra, because we don't know what was contained in the bag that was over his shoulder. Was it his personal effects, a change of clothing? Was he planning to go out for the night and party and then have a change of clothes in the morning? Or was he truly trying to escape and that it had things in it that were really important, like a passport and other kinds of things? The other question is the bag that was found. Now, I'm a little confused. One contained narcotics and alcohol, saying, "Hey, this is for Liam." The other one, what was in that bag? But regardless, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? That if he were trying to get out of that hotel room using what he had done in the past, and it's a term I've often used in training police officers, that past behavior is predictive of future behavior. He snuck out, we know historically, from his hotel room through the balcony. It would make good sense rather than having your arms full of bags. Maybe you'd throw one to the next balcony down, thinking that you'd easily be able to drop into that balcony and then make the next jump below, which would have put him effectively on the ground. Instead, if everything appears the way it is looking, his judgment was impaired.
You made a really good point about the second bag because, as we've discussed, the first bag that I mentioned, we knew it had the sign for Liam, the narcotics, the whiskey. But the other bag that was actually around his body when he was found, we don't know what was in there. I'm wondering why we may know what was in one bag and not in the other. Why would police keep that part secret?
Yeah, and again, did they keep it secret, or was it just an artifact of they were releasing information and they didn't clarify, hey, by the way, folks, there were two bags, one contained this, the other contained that. But it is significant that they call out that the one bag is kind of a go party bag filled with narcotics and drugs and alcohol. And again, why they're calling that out, I don't know. Or was it simply an oversight that they didn't say, hey, here's what was in both bags?
I think after Liam Payne's death, we've really been winding the clock back and taking a look at everything that led up to it. Could something have prevented it? What went wrong? Obviously, there's been charges, which we'll get to in a second. But if we're talking about his life in the moments, days beforehand, we have this new security camera video that we're seeing where he looks a bit off. We do know that he was likely inebriated in some way at the time of his death, but he looks like a bit argumentative in the security camera video. What do you make of all of that?
Again, I think this is what was so important about going back in time and looking at his history and the way in which he responds when he's under the influence of alcohol or drugs. We all knew somebody that was the angry drunk versus the one that's the happy drunk and gets along well. So was this part of his personality when he was under the influence? We know that in the lobby he was breaking his laptop computer. We know that he was very agitated and creating quite a ruckus in the lobby. Was that because there was what we would term as a precipitating stressor that happened, something that really set him off? What did he receive an email on that laptop, and that just caused him to go into this crazy funk? Or was he just building and slowly getting more and more confused and as a result of the narcotics or a mental situation? Was he really experiencing some kind of mental health crises?
You mentioned his laptop just as an idea. Maybe he got some sort of message. We do know that the investigators in Argentina looked through a lot of information. I mean, they interviewed dozens of witnesses, but then they also looked through his cloud, his cell phone, his social media. But I mean, we keep our phones with us all the time. We're talking all the time. There's a lot of data in our phone. Do you think it's possible they're still combing through all that information?
Oh, absolutely. There would be so much information that they would want to really get an idea of what's happening. Not only those messages that would require search warrants to be able to get some of that information, the phone's physical location during the days leading up to this event. Were there contacts and physical location between messages and the device's location that show him going to meet with somebody somewhere? And could it have been in one of those homes of the people who were ultimately arrested? So all of that has to be put together in a timeline that makes sense so that they can understand the behavior, not only the emotional behavior, but the physical behavior of where he's going and what he's doing and who he's communicating with. Because all of that helps bring together this picture that we're trying to put together based on publicly released information that leaves us with a lot of questions that I believe law enforcement would have as a result of the forensics.
So that's the digital forensics side of things. But if we're looking at the other side with his autopsy, something I keep going back to is whether Liam Payne was actually unconscious when he fell off the balcony. So we have seen reports that he was potentially conscious right before, if he in fact threw his bag to the second floor thinking he was going to make it there. But we don't know for sure whether he was unconscious at the time of the fall. How does all of that play in?
I think that's interesting because I also read a report that first responders um, did some initial testing where they see some reflex things happen that did not happen in Liam Payne's case that would suggest that maybe at that critical moment when he hits the ground that he was unconscious. But you're right, either he or another actor staged a beautiful scene of putting the second bag down onto the second floor, packing a bag, making it appear that he's trying to leave. And again, I think this case really is leaning toward accident, but you have to consider, and this is something only the investigators really get to see and try to decipher, is whether there was staging going on, whether this man was literally unconscious at the time he was either propelled off of that balcony or fell off of the balcony trying to make these moves and these jumps. And again, you got to go back to this preceding behavior that he would escape from his room. And again, I'm using that word as well, but that he would escape from his room going off of the balcony. Past behavior is predictive of future behavior. It would take someone who would have to know his behaviors and how he did things in the past. And undoubtedly, the hotel staff worried that he might do that. So maybe he said something to that effect.
You know, it's interesting. Out of the three arrests, there's one that's an alleged drug dealer. Then hotel staff, as you said, they were kind of monitoring him. And then another person that was really close to Payne that had been with him the entire time he was in Argentina. So obviously knows him pretty well, at least his habits for the past couple of days. So those two people, the one that's the hotel employee and the one that was close to Payne, they have an eye on him and his habits, what he does. Do you think those would be the people that police would look at if they potentially may have staged this scene?
Well, I think all three obviously would have to be looked at. And again, I guess hotel surveillance footage would tell us whether the drug dealer specifically came to the hotel or not. But it's the people that were with him at those final moments, including hotel staff members who carried him up to the room and took him inside. But when you see hotel workers doing some things like removing the mirror, and I've heard accounts that it was inside the room, I've heard it was just outside of the door. I don't know where it was, but they obviously felt like it was something that they needed to do. They were concerned about his behavior. If someone was really planning a murder, it makes you wonder, would they go through the steps that happened in this thing to be so visibly seen carrying him and other things? I don't know. And again, it's these cases get so interesting because it's the totality of evidence, not a single piece of evidence that really paints the picture and tells us what happened.
You're right. And there are multiple players in this, kind of going off what you were talking about. One of the people, their charges was abandonment of a person followed by death. So we can assume, based on that charge, that person left Liam Payne alone and then he died as a result. Do you think that's something that investigators are also going to consider?
Well, I think they have to consider that under the criminal code, although I think we're seeing them tip their hand that they don't believe that the hotel or staff did anything criminal by getting him into his room and then leaving. Most importantly, because that hotel manager calls first responders, the people who should respond when someone's in crisis. So I think the question is going to become on the civil side of the fence of, did the hotel have some responsibility to sit with him until medical personnel arrived, if in fact that was the plan from the get-go, or did they put him in his room thinking, okay, things have settled down, and then all of a sudden he escalated and made some phone calls, or he was out on the balcony and someone in the room next to him called the hotel and that led them to make the phone call. So we can't just assume what may or may not have happened because we just have so little information amidst all this bucket load of information that's coming out every single day on the case.
My next question is almost twofold. One, we have these three arrests, but we don't know anyone's name or identity. So, why may that be that their identities are still anonymous? Part one of the question. And part two is, do you think any more arrests could be down the pipeline?
I think on the first question, number one, we would have to look at Argentinian law and the way they do things normally there. Do they release an arrest affidavit like we do here in the United States that becomes a public record that we can access and determine who people are? I guarantee people in the community know who these people are. And I find it interesting that it's not leaking out that way, that somebody's not saying my cousin was the drug dealer or the accused drug dealer or something like that. But again, we have to take into account what is local law and what is the precedent locally in that. And is it possible that more charges could come forward? Absolutely. What becomes interesting in these kinds of cases is more of a personality of the investigative agency, of do they feel like they've gotten their pound of flesh and they've made their mark, and we look, folks, you're safe, and we've made an arrest, and they're going to just focus on what they've got, the low hanging fruit, or are they going to dig deeper into this and try to make additional charges? And I guess that's the stuff that keeps you and me awake at night, wondering if there's more to the story than we're hearing.
Going off that, our entire interview so far has been a bunch more questions we still don't know the answers to. You and I are speculating what could have happened. So obviously, this is still under investigation. What is next for the authorities down there, hoping to find out more info and answer some of these questions we're talking about today?
Well, now's the painstaking process of a true criminal investigation, where you really make sure that you have uncovered every stone that you can possibly think of. And I'll tell you what, Sierra, I if I could go back and fix all the mistakes I made in all the criminal cases I handled over my career, I'd love to do it, because the moment they close this case, they're going to think, "Oh, why didn't I do this, or why didn't I check that lead out?" And sometimes we in the public get a little critical when we learn of something later. Well, most likely law enforcement learned about it at the same time we did, and they're probably thinking the same thing. Why didn't I do this? But there is so much work to do in these kinds of cases, in just kind of tying up all the loose ends and chasing down the conspiracy theories and the leads that are just absolutely bogus, but still have to be followed up on, just so you can say to the public, we've exhausted every lead.
It truly is a devastating story of a life cut far too short. But thank you again to retired Police Commander Mike King for diving into the case with us. Mike takes a look at other cases too on his podcast Profiling Evil, or in his book Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Society cult. As for Liam Payne, Argentinian authorities say his death is still under investigation. So check back with us for more updates as they're released. For Law&Crime, I'm Sierra Gillespie.